Yes, yes, good afternoon. Is that Mr. Hunt?
It is, hi.
Hi, it's Mr. Hussain here regarding my complaint with the West Yorkshire Joint Services.
Hi, how can I help?
I'm just responding to the email that you sent on the 13th of January 2020, where you've, found that that you are of the view that the West Yorkshire Joint Services have not complied with the Data Protection Act. You further go on to provide that they should look to respond within 14 days.
Yeah.
Can I just receive clarity on what you mean by respond within 14 days? Do you mean that they should just write me a letter or that they should look to comply within 14 days?
I mean that that we have asked them to comply with the SAR within 14 days.
Okay, all right. Okay, that's what my understanding of reading the content of your letter was. That considering the substantial amount of time that's now expired, that within 14 days is a reasonable amount of time for them to comply by considering that if I had initiated this, if that was the 13th of January, the time period, it would only be a month anyway. But they've contacted me back saying something very gobbledygook about, yes, we've taken it on board, we're replying, and we'll look to get back to you sometime soon. We can't give you a time frame.
Right, okay. Well, I'll explain. That 14-day deadline, I mean, really, the actual deadline for response has passed.
Yes.
That 14 days is a sort of, I'm asking them to respond, and that's a sort of guide for when they should aim to provide you with a response to your SAR. Now, hopefully, they should be able to comply with that.
Well, they can't. They're not. They're not going to be complying with that.
Yeah, I mean, if that's the case.
Just to clarify, I mean, when you say respond to the SAR, basically, I think they've interpreted that as just basically writing back to me because I've received something today, and it's a very short message because I have previously liaised with them. And it basically, I have sought information from the ICO and that they are in agreement with this timescale. So basically, have they contacted you?
I'm not going to divulge if they've been in touch with me or not, but what I will say is I've asked them to respond to your SAR, to provide a SAR response within 14 days. It's not an actual binding deadline because that deadline has passed. But I have asked them to aim.
Okay.
Respond to your SAR within 14 days.
All right.
If obviously, you're welcome to contact us again, but it's not a sort of it's not a sort of legal deadline of any kind.
Okay, all right. Yes.
I've asked them to aim for that.
Yes, I mean the legal deadline has now expired. You've given them basically a compromise further deadline in essence, but not strictly in law, but just as to accommodate. That is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, they've sent me an email today saying at this time I cannot give you an exact date as to when the information will be made available.
Yeah, I mean the thing is, if, like I said, I mean, yes, the deadline has expired. We've asked them to respond. If there's, an awful lot of information, and that information is very complex. So, say for instance, with regard to going through third-party data that would have actions, then obviously it might just not be conceivable for them to respond within that 14 days and provide an accurate response. So, like I say, I've asked them to provide that within 14 days. If the situation drags on, let's say, potentially we could. Can you just bear with me? Are you all right to hold the line for a second?
Yeah, sure. Take your time. Hello.
Yeah, I mean, basically, I've asked them to prioritise the request. Now, if that 14-day passes, and bear in mind that if there is a huge amount of information to get through, we would take that into consideration. As far as the ICO is concerned, our role really has sort of ceased. We've made our assessment of the situation. We've told the DC that they've infringed data protection law and told them what they should do to put it right. Really, our role doesn't continue at that point.
Okay. Okay.
I would, if I don't want to put a time frame on it, but if if you're waiting an excessive amount of time, you're welcome. You can get back in touch with us, and we can look as to whether some sort of follow-up would be appropriate. But just bear in mind that our role at the ICO has finished with that assessment.
Okay, all right. Okay. I appreciate your openness and frankness, but just for your consideration, and I've obviously wrote to the West Yorkshire Joint Services regarding this, is that I appreciate there may be a substantial amount of data and so on and so forth, but the GDPR legislation has come about, as you may or may not know, simply because of big tech companies hoarding up, lots of data. And so the amount of data that any operational organization hold is minuscule compared to the amount of data someone like Google will hold about you, or Facebook may hold about you, whom are equally obligated to comply with those time frame and time scales. Now, if you know, the Data Protection Act did allow initially up to 40 days prior to the GDPR implementation, which has limited that to 30 days. Now, yes, there may be circumstances where extra time is required, and the legislation makes provisions for that as an extension of 2 months. Now, for your reference, I need to make you aware that this application of mine for subject access disclosure was made initially on the 9th of July 2018. So since the 9th of July 2018, the West Yorkshire Joint Services have been aware that I've made a subject access request, which they should have complied by the 9th of August 2018. At that time, their position was highly inaccurate, and they said that we're not in a position to disclose this information at this moment in time. Okay, so then I backed off because they said that the certain issues are still with this, and and their position initially was that you need to pay us some money, and I obviously backed off at that. I then made a subsequent application in 2019, of which this then was their position was, they said our position is exactly the same as it was in 2018. We're not budging on this. So then, therefore, I approached yourselves, and now I believe I've fully exhausted going down the avenue of the Information Commissioner's Office, because you yourselves have now concluded that obviously there was a breach of the Data Protection Act, i.e. they failed to comply with the legislation. You've then proceeded to provide them as a courtesy, or as just a way to resolve the outstanding issue, saying, all right, well, can you comply within 14 days to the SAR, considering that you've had all this time. They've then not, because you didn't use the word comply, you said respond. They just basically thought that as we just send another response letter, and in that response letter they said that we still can't give you a definitive time. And that has always been the case with myself. I've asked them for a definitive timescale rather than leaving things open-ended, and I'm just slightly disappointed at this stage. We're now in January 2019, and the West Yorkshire Joint Services are still no further in a position to give me a definitive date. And I appreciate that you're saying that your role and remit is now pretty much coming to an end.
I wouldn't expect them to give a definitive date anyway, because it's about responding to the SAR correctly in line with the law, rather than we wouldn't set an arbitrary deadline.
But the law does, doesn't it, though? But you have gathered that they have not complied to the law. The law does send the law sends a specific date, 30 days, if not an extension for 2 months.
Yeah, but I'm afraid that's the deadline in law. There is, I wouldn't expect anyone to set a sort of another firm deadline, because we would expect the organisation to respond.
Yes.
To go through the information to assess what can be
Yes.
disclosed
Yes.
and can't be disclosed.
Yep.
And to do that correctly. Now,
But correctly comes afterwards. It comes only after you've complied with the law, and the law states 30 days, otherwise 2 months. Like I said, this was now 2 years later. For them to still request, I mean, you know what concerns me, Mr. Hunter, and I'm going to look to end this conversation now. What concerns me is that, in essence, they have had nearly 2 years, all right. And if I was an organization, let's just say, for example, if I'm an organization and I'm asked to comply with the law, i.e. the Data Protection Act, and I'm running an organization and I've been made aware that there's strict financial penalties, I could just basically just ignore them. And I can just say, well, I can't be bothered with this. Let somebody make an application. I'm just going to ignore it. All right. After 30 days, I just want him to respond. All right. Let the applicant make his applications. Then eventually let them go to the lengthy process of going through the ICO, because I've gone through a very lengthy process with yourself. Let the ICO come back to us and give us some advice and tell us, you got 14 days to respond, and we may or may not respond even then. Let's just really drag this along, and eventually after maybe 2 years later we'll give that information. Does that not, in essence, practically speaking, clearly undermine the principles behind the GDPR and Data Protection Act?
well, I mean, ultimately, if you wanted to, you could proceed by the court.
Yes, I have fully advised our West Yorkshire Joint Service. That's exactly what my intentions are. But that's my options available to me, because I can also take legal action against them, and I have done so. I've told them, you haven't complied, the deadline's finished, I'm going to charge you 20 million euros, full stop. But that's moving away from my options. It just means that my concerns are that the Information Commissioner's Office is basically a toothless organization, all right? I.e., it's all bark and no bite. In essence, because obviously, like I said, it's kind of making a mockery of the whole GDPR principle. I mean, if for example, if you're not going to be taking this issue strictly, then it gives laxivity to organizations to basically just undermine. Yeah, in law, practically, yes, there's a deadline and there's potential penalties, but the reality is that nothing's really going to happen, and we can just drag things along and maybe we'll not comply.
Right. Well, I'm sorry you feel that way, but ultimately, the data protection law is enforceable through the court.
Mm-hmm.
The role of the ICO is to assess based on information provided to us. That's where our role.
Okay.
That's what.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Now, moving forward, obviously, like I'm gonna look to end this. Obviously, much like yourself, you've found a finding, you've advised them further. You're saying that if they don't even comply within, like, let's say another month or so, that I can come back to yourself and we can start this process again.
We couldn't start the process again, but if a month passes and you haven't had a substantial response, I'd be happy to contact them and ask them, what steps they're taking.
Okay.
But it wouldn't be more than that.
Okay, I understand. Okay, that's fine. I would like to, at this stage, because we're looking to disengage our relationship at this stage, and obviously, as you're aware, I have made a subject access request. Also, I would like to make a freedom of information request from your organization to determine, since the implementation of GDPR coming into force in May 2018, how many prosecutions has the ICO proceeded?
Right, okay, bear with me. I'm just going to give me 2 tips, please. Are you right to hold the line again?
Yeah, sure.
Thanks for waiting. Yeah, FOI requests have to be made in writing.
Okay, can I not make them orally?
No, they have to be in writing. So what I suggest is go to our website. In the contact us section, you'll find you'll find everything you need to make an FOI request.
Okay.
You just select from says what you want to do. Are you an individual or an organisation? Just select individual, and then what do you want to do? The option there is request information about the ICO.
Okay, can I just confirm? Normally I make my ICO for FOI request through the website called What Do They Know? Do you respond to those as well? What?
Those where FOI requests are made public.
Yes.
I don't know if you can make requests to organisations via What Do They Know.
No, I have made them in the past to local authorities
Oh, to local authorities.
and to the police. You are a public organisation, yes?
Yes, we are.
Okay, all right. That's fine. Thank you very much, Mr. Hunt. Hopefully, I won't have to contact you again, but I'll see what happens by the 13th of February if I receive anything. Thank you very much, Mr. Hunt. Bye.